Hey, good evening, and welcome, wherever you're catching up with us on, whether that's on YouTube or if that's on a podcast platform. We are so glad to have you join us tonight for Friday Night Conversation. FNC, let's share it in the room, guys. FNC, there we go.
Yeah,
Hey, my name is Joseph. I'm super excited to be on this tonight, chatting with you. I've also got two amazing people with me. We've got Angie, who leads our youth ministry. We're all part of the Junction Church. She leads the youth ministry at the Junction Church. And we've also got Pastor Jonah, who pastors our Leicester campus. Tonight, it's the big one, guys. It's the big one, isn't it? Tonight, we're talking about Valentine's Day, expectations versus reality. And it's going to be really interesting. So I'm going to pass it over to Pastor Jonah. Who's going to kick us off. Go for it, Pastor Jonah.
Yeah, so just wanted to start off the questions for this evening with Pastor Joe. Will you be my Valentine?
Oh, do you know what? I've been waiting years for you to ask, and you do such a public one. I'll have to say yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
As long as I was in the chat, I would be putting celebrating emojis and lots and lots of love hearts.
I must add that I'm very high maintenance, so you've got to make sure that you treat me right.
Wow.
Oh man. So okay, that reality is a little bit different to my expectations.
So here we go.
We've called today's episode Valentine's Day Expectations versus Reality, by the way. So that was the reference there. But anyway, obviously, yeah, really excited for this episode. I feel like it's a very topical one, and it's always really interesting to talk about relationships and that whole area. And I suppose the reason that we've titled today's episode Valentine's Day Expectations versus Reality is because there is very much a sense that the promise of Valentine's Day is that it's going to be this incredible day, celebration of love and relationships and all that stuff. But in actual fact, for tons of people, the reality of Valentine's Day is rubbish. Like, tons of people just really don't have a good experience of Valentine's Day. So maybe we'll just start off by chatting about that. Like, why do you think that is?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm just laughing because someone in the comments put R.I.P. Becca. Becca's Jonah's wife, by the way, and apparently I'm competing with her now. No, that's a great question. I think it's because of all that. It's the whole expectation thing, isn't it? Valentine's Day is kind of, I'm one of those people that's, I don't know, maybe I'm just not really big on it personally. But it's one of those things that's really kind of, pushed forward in society, and it's a big thing, and there's movies that, about it, and it's just a whole thing going on. And so it's almost like in the build up to it, like you go into all the shops and everything, it's all Valentine's Day themed. You've got the red hearts and chocolate boxes, and and it's just constantly, it's like when you're approaching anything major, it's all you can think about. So I think that's part of what it is. So it's kind of like just drummed into your head. And for people who maybe are not in relationships, it can be quite difficult. It can highlight maybe an area or a tension that they've got going on in perhaps an unhealthy way, where maybe I'm not saying Valentine's Day is bad, but maybe sometimes we approach it or we view it with the wrong perspective, and I think that's what makes it unhealthy sometimes.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, just to follow off from that, I feel like for single people, I feel like sometimes Valentine's Day might be a reminder maybe of what they don't have or what they don't get to experience, especially like the day is so, I guess, over exaggerated, this being like this grand day of love where people do these grand gestures and these big things. And especially if like you're not in a relationship, it can kind of just, I feel like it hits a bit differently, like, just seeing everyone else doing all of this stuff, and then like you're, I guess, maybe to the side and maybe not involved in that way. So
that is so true, isn't it? Is that it's very much in your face, and especially for people who maybe happen to be looking for a relationship, it can almost be like just that constant reminder of something that is missing that you'd like to have. So yeah, it's very interesting, isn't it? And I feel like something about our culture, certainly. In fact, before we move on, I feel like there's also a touch of comparison that goes on there, which, by the way, if you are listening to this episode, what you need to do as soon as you've finished watching this, if you're on YouTube, or if you're listening on podcast, what you want to do is pause it and go over to our Junction Church teaching podcast and listen to Pastor Roy's message from last Sunday called The Comparison Trap, because you're going to get some amazing teaching on how to really help that area of your life. But something about our culture is that there is a sense that romantic relationships are very much idolized. You know, you think of all the TV shows, you know, like the Love Island, you know, even like the kind of old school ones, like, is it Take Me Out? I've never actually watched it, but I feel like that. Yeah. You know, you've got all that, and you've got like, you know, films like love is very much one of those key themes that story is always built around. Bringing that sense of romantic relationships being idolized. So what are the downsides of this? And how do we not fall into the trap of idolizing wanting to be in a relationship ourselves?
No, that's great. You're so right. When you know, everything, it's almost the most talked about thing in culture and society. Not, you know, not just movies and TV shows. Music, for example, a vast majority of the songs tend to be about love in one perspective or the other. I think it's not bad to talk about love or to highlight love. It's just that a lot of times you get the impression that it's only that specific type of love that's being highlighted. You know, there's obviously so many other fruitful relationships that you can have, but then what happens is we just kind of get lost and saturated in this one perspective that the only fulfilling relationship you can have is a romantic relationship, when actually that's just simply not true. There's so many other fulfilling relationships you can have. You can have great friendships, you can have acquaintances that are great, you know what I mean, you can have great professional relationships, you can get fulfilled in many other ways than being in a romantic relationship. And I think that's what it is. It's because there's been this narrative that's been kind of painted, if you like, or this picture that's been painted, where it's almost like this is the only way that you can get fulfilled or you can feel complete. Whereas there's a lot more to life than that. And, you know, that being in a romantic relationship isn't the goal in life. It's actually a byproduct of a healthy life. And you end up hopefully finding someone who's good and you're compatible. And, you know, I feel like that's a product of something. It's, and maybe it's a bit harsh saying it's not a goal. What I mean is it's not the only goal. It's not like our one aim in life is to, you know, is to find somebody. But yes, it's something that happens along the way, but it's not our sole purpose, if you get what I mean. And I feel like what culture does is almost kind of spins that around and makes that the sole purpose. It's like you've not accomplished anything, or you get, you know, you maybe get to a certain age and it's like, well, you've really not ticked that box yet. You've not kind of got that card until you've done this thing. And I think that's really unhealthy and unhelpful.
Yeah, so true. And I feel like I love what you're saying about the whole achievement thing, because I feel like sometimes, like in life, it's kind of portrayed as like, you know, once I find myself in a relationship, then I've kind of like made it, and then I can move on to the next stage of life. Like it's like, you know, you've kind of got to be like, you've got to attain that to like I guess, like as you said, be fulfilled. But I feel like we've got to like kind of remind ourselves, especially when it comes to like the stuff we see like on TV programs and songs and movies and whatnot, that actually that's not really like an accurate representation of love. Like if anything, it's like a manufactured thing to make us feel good, a manufactured love that appeals to make us want to watch it more, to make us want to like feed into the story more, the narrative more. But actually that narrative isn't actually real. Like, you know, if you watch films, and I mean, I'm not a big rom-com lover because they're so predictable, you know, boy meets girl, boy falls in love, girl, they fall in love. Actually, no, they have like a little middle bit, and then like all of a sudden they all come back together and it's like, oh my gosh, yay, great. And they all kind of follow that path and follow that narrative. But if you think about it, real life doesn't actually work that way. Like romantic relationships don't work that way. They're all so different. They're all I see you laughing past you. They're also varied, and actually we shouldn't base our love on what we see on the movies, because that is not real. That's not like not in like a harsh way, but that's not necessarily attainable either. And actually, if we idolize that and we put that on a priority, we'll never get like, I guess, the true experiences of like what real love is. And actually there's more to relationships than like, you know, someone standing outside your room serenading you. And I mean, I'm using very wild examples, but you never know, some people might want it.
That was a reference to, I know that film, was that a reference to Dirty Dancing?
Yeah, it could be a reference to 1,000 films.
Any rom-com ever, where the guy gets his guitar and stands outside, and for some reason she's always upstairs. And so
exactly.
Playing. Honestly, I feel like you just summarized every rom-com ever.
For real, can I just say though, I actually love rom-coms.
I was gonna ask you.
guilty pleasure of mine, like, but very precise ones. Notting Hill is a phenomenal film. In my opinion, Notting Hill is a
I thought Notting
brilliant
Hill was a
film.
carnival. Is there a film called Notting Hill?
Oh yeah, but it's
It is.
based in the place in London called
All
Notting Hill.
right. Okay.
Yeah.
I guess you
There
learn
you go.
something on every FNC.
There you
There
go.
was
There you go. There you go. But no, I mean, I love the points that you guys have drawn out there, and I think, I mean, there's so much you could kind of latch onto. But even Pastor Joe, I know you talked about the sense of where we gain our fulfillment. And it is very true. You know, there's very much this, and Angie, even you mentioned this, that whole sense of attaining a relationship, like checking the box, which first off, I kind of think to when you think about that, you think, well, that's not exactly very valuing to the person that you're going to end up with if you end up with somebody. You know, is somebody just a box to be checked in our lives? But then also, Pastor Joe, you know, it's just, in my own personal reading this week, there's a verse in, it's 1 or 2 Samuel, where King David from the Old Testament, he says of Jonathan, who was his best friend, your love was better than women. And I think to myself, man, like that, like talk about a quality fulfilling friendship. And it makes me think to myself, man, okay, maybe this whole idea of romantic relationships being the ultimate relationship that we get fulfillment from isn't quite hitting the mark.
You're absolutely right. You know, that's what that statement paints is that this picture that there is more to the butterflies, and you know, and all of that stuff's important. It's important to have, you know, if you are in a romantic relationship, it's important to have that sense of butterflies and that sense of attraction, but it's not everything. And it's not that's going to stand the test of time. You know, like David and Jonathan obviously went through some challenges together as well, and their relationship was put to the test, and ultimately, you know, when we read the story, ultimately it was a strong relationship that survived. And you know, obviously a sad ending for Jonathan, but you could see the sense of the strength of the bond that they had. And what a beautiful, if you like, example to let people know that you can have great relationships that aren't romantic, and they don't always have to be. And you don't have to feel a sense of loss because you're not in a romantic relationship, because there's so much more out of relationships that you can gain, and that you can enjoy that isn't necessarily the romantic side. And you know what I'm being very careful not to paint romantic relationships as something that's not important, because it is important. And you know someone else out there who's single might be going, well, here's this guy, he's in a relationship and he's sitting there telling us that's not what I'm saying. It's great, it's absolutely great. But what I am saying is, you know, unless you kind of have this understanding that there's a lot more to it, you kind of go into it in the wrong headspace anyway. And you don't get the most out of it. So it's almost like, to be the best version of you going into a relationship, you kind of need to get an understanding of of the benefits of relationships in general. You need to be benefiting from other relationships as well. Otherwise you go in kind of, I guess, really lacking and not being the best version of yourself because of a misunderstanding of what that relationship should be.
Yeah, I really resonate with that, Pastor Joe, because I feel like I you know, previously I would be that single person who was like, he's in a relationship, he's talking, yada yada yada. But what you're saying is so true, in the sense of like, there's so much more to get out of life in general, but so much more to get out of relationships that aren't just romantic. And I know for me, like, just like following off from that point in the idea of like fulfillment, like I feel like there's a lot of talk and a lot of pressure about, you know, being someone that's like worth the wait, and like, you know, you want to, like, so in the terms of like idolizing relationships. So I feel like we idolize being that person who's like going to be worth the wait. Like, oh, this is the person that when I finally meet my significant other, they're going to be like, oh yeah, this is who I've been waiting for. So we work on ourselves and we develop ourselves, and not for us, but for this person that we've yet to meet, which in a sense is not bad. But actually, when we're idolizing somebody else, and we're not, I guess, putting like, we're not like, you know, that verse is like, you know, do everything when you're like, you know, working for God and not for man. Like when we grow and when we're like, you know, trying to make ourselves into a better person, I feel like when we have a perspective of idolizing relationships, we're doing it for that end goal of getting a relationship. But yeah, I know what really helped me is like I switched my thinking. I was like, yeah, it's great to be worth the wait, but also, you know, you want to make the wait worth it as well. And like as you said, like you can be finding fulfillment in so many different things, so many different relationships. Like as you said, a romantic relationship is important if you are in one, but it's not the be all and end all of your life as well. So yeah, just to follow up from your point.
That was
like that.
brilliant, Angie. Can you just reiterate that line?
Yeah.
So yeah, you want to be worth the wait, but you want to make the wait worth it as well.
Oh my word! There you go.
That's a long hashtag, but we're claiming that as the hashtag for this week.
Come on, that's the official hashtag for FNC this week. Huh? Oh my word! It's such a good point, Angie, and I think that's the key thing, isn't it? Actually, the wait has got to be worth it. And I mean, we talk about going back to the original question, which was all about idolization. And actually, if the sole purpose of working on ourselves is so that the wait is worth it, I'm trying to get that the right way around now. But then that means that, okay, so everything about my personal transformation, my journey, the things that I'm working on is for a man and or woman. And I love that perspective that you brought in from that verse, that, you know, do everything as unto the Lord, not unto people, because that's the thing with idolization. You know, when we look through the story of scripture, that's the key thing about idolization is God should be number one. And nothing else should take that number one spot. Like, you know, when God made creation, he's the creator. He made an order to it. He made, you know, the plants, the animals, etc. And then he made humans and he said, rule over them. There's an order. And humans were made to put God first. And it's like whenever we allow things to get out of order in our lives, we end up in a place of unfulfillment. And ultimately, that is going to be both personally and, let's say that this, you know, someone's story ends, you know, has another person getting into a relationship with another person in that, it's actually going to be so much pressure on that other person to have all of my fulfillment dependent on my relationship with you.
Yeah,
100%. And that's what you've just basically worded. I was trying to word it so much better earlier, and that's what I was trying to get at when I was talking about kind of going into something not the best version of yourself. And it's almost like you've got this hole or something. You look into this other person to kind of be the antidote or the fix to a lot of things, when that's not what they're there for. And then what happens, what always happens eventually is you know, bitterness might start to set in, or you know, a sense of a lack of fulfillment, and then you might turn around and blame that person when it had nothing to do with them. And it was just, you know, it was all because we kind of went in with the wrong perspective in the first place. And it's so important what you said there, Pastor Jonah. I love how you worded it, because that is it. Like, that's what we should have at the back of our minds. It's like, there is, you know, like, nobody out there is the person, like, nobody there has the power to fix you. Like, it's just, that's just not a thing. You know, it's the Holy Spirit. God's the one who does the work on us to fix us when we submit to him, not another human being. And it's very unfair to put that pressure on someone else. You know, it's very unfair to kind of go, oh yeah, you know, it's maybe you have a certain trait or something. You're like, oh, I'm sure that when I get in a relationship, then I'll be fine. Or you're going, oh, I'm just fixing myself so that I can get in a relationship. Well, it's the wrong reason anyway. When you get in that relationship, yes, you might stay fixed for a couple of months or so, but eventually you will be like, oh, I'm in a relationship now. You're going to go back to your old ways anyway, because you're going to go back into a sense of comfort. It's almost like, you know, it's almost like when you win a championship, then that's why a lot of teams that win champion. I don't know why I'm going into sport, but here we are. We're going to carry on. A lot of teams that win championships struggle to win it again the next year, sometimes because of that sense of like, you've already achieved. And so, you know, it shows why that being in a relationship, being your motivation is not great, because ultimately when you do get into a relationship, you might end up losing some of that motivation, and then you realize you've not been working on yourself for the right reasons, and so there's no longevity to that. But ultimately, we should be, like you were saying, Angie, everything that we do is unto the Lord. We should be looking at ourselves as children of God and wanting to be great people for his purpose and his pleasure. And then out of that comes healthy relationships, I feel.
So good, Pastor Joe. I so
Very
agree
good.
with that. I feel like we could just keep on talking about, that specific point for a long time. But just thinking about that element though, because like we've observed, there is a sense of the power of culture. And when culture idolizes something, that's going to have an impact on how we view stuff. And so I suppose then the question becomes, what is a godly way to respond to that pressure from culture?
I think
I was just presenting the sort of like the interjection into your answer. That's what that was. Yeah.
Go teamwork. I feel like a godly way to respond is just like having a trust in God. In the sense of like I'm not gonna idolize what culture idolizes, because ultimately like it's fleeting, it's baseless, it doesn't have a great foundation. But when I trust in God and when I trust in his word, that is a solid foundation, that's consistent. Like we were talking about it a couple of weeks ago, how do we know like the Bible isn't fake news? Like, and if you didn't listen to it last week, I'd highly recommend go check out FNC from last week. But we talked about like the constant nature of God. So I feel like just trusting in God, and I know we always like, it might sound a bit Christian just to say just trust in God, but like a response to it is just knowing that God is in control and that I don't have to idolize something and feel like I'm running towards something and trying to achieve something that isn't something I'm even supposed to be running towards anyway. But actually my eyes are fixed and my eyes are trusting and looking towards God in everything I do as well. So yeah,
really good. Love that, Angie. I think as well, it's so important to realize that the most important relationship in your life is your relationship with God. And I feel like ultimately that's like where you're most focused on. That's where your most focus should be on. Does that even make sense? That's what you should focus the most on. That's what I'm trying to say. And I feel like in those moments where where perhaps we're feeling that pressure, turn to that and think, or ask yourself, why am I not it may be the case, but why am I not getting fulfillment out of my relationship with God? Like, where is that at the moment? And has that gone stale? Do I need to refresh it? What can I do? Because ultimately, this is going to sound really weird, okay, but like when you have a relationship with God, ultimately over time you want to make sure that's fresh, and so you're going to try new things, you're going to shake up routines and stuff like that. When you get into an actual a romantic relationship, for example, ultimately over time you will need to freshen that up as well. You can't just keep doing the same things, because you're human beings and you will get bored. And so almost in a very strange way, it's like practice for that. But what I'm trying to say is like that's the most important thing, and it's like it's so important to get fulfillment like out of that. I feel like that's where our main fulfillment should be coming from, not our relationships with other people, but actually our relationship with God, because then out of that we can then outwork our best relationships with others as well. And so I feel like that's a good way of dealing with that pressure. If I find that I just have a sense of a lack of fulfillment, then I need to kind of go back to the source and go, where should my fulfillment be coming from in the first place? And kind of ask myself why that's not happening. And then I feel like the closer we get to God, the more in tune we are with him, and then the less likely we are to make relational mistakes or end up going into things unprepared or in the wrong way, or feeling pressure to do certain things, because then we're just content, aren't we? And it's almost like we just kind of approach everything from the right perspective as well. So I think that's really helpful.
That's brilliant. But I mean, both of what you said there is absolutely brilliant. I mean, just to add a very short thought on that, there's a line that has been shared, amongst some Christian circles, which is, instead of focus on looking for your special someone, focus on becoming the person you're looking for is looking for. Which I think is a very helpful line, but can be also a little unhelpful. And let me explain why. Very helpful because it gives us that purpose, similar, Angie, to what you said about being worth the wait. But then also, if I think to myself, okay, what's someone that I'm looking for? Okay, I'm married, so I'm very happily married with the person I'm looking for. But let's just say, hypothetical scenario, Becca, I love you.
Be very careful, because Becca is in the chat, okay? And actually, you know what? Carry on, because then she'll stop coming for me. She'll come for you instead.
No.
So if I am a Christian, and actually, I don't just want to be any old Christian. Like, I want to be a Christian that is on fire for Jesus, that loves him, that loves his church, that is serving God with all I can get to. Okay. And so that means I want to, if I'm going to have a relationship, I want that special someone to have that as well. Because if God's number one in my life, I want them, I love God with all I am, then, I want them to love God also. Okay. But if I want them to love God like as much as I do, and to be like on fire for Jesus, and to want to serve God with all that they are probably not gonna ideally want to go for someone who is completely focused on searching for their special someone. Paradoxically, they're gonna want someone who is also putting God number one. So paradoxically, the best way that we can find someone who is like on fire for Jesus, serving God, etc., is to not put them in the number one spot, is to put God in the number one spot, and then allow them to fall into the place that God created for them in our life, which is kind of crazy when you think about it, but it blows my mind.
Very unpopular opinion, isn't it? But absolutely true. You know what I mean? Like you wouldn't they wouldn't be chanting your name in, like, I guess what's the word I'm looking for? Secular circles, with that sort of advice. But that is absolutely the truth. That that is it. The best relationships, and don't forget that we are created for for God's purpose. Like, that's why we're here on earth. It's for him. And so ultimately, like, if I'm living in that lane, and someone else is living in that lane, and ultimately then when we do meet, we've got the same purpose. We're going to the same place, and that's what's important in relationships, especially romantic ones. A sense of unity, a sense of togetherness, knowing both what you're going for, having the same priorities, stuff like that. And if you're not kind of going for the same thing before you get together, you're going to find that there's a lot of friction. And so you're absolutely right in saying that it's quite paradoxical, isn't it? It's almost like, don't look and you'll find.
There you go. I mean, that verse from the Sermon on the Mount, what Jesus said, what did he say? Put God first, and all these things will be added to you also. Matthew 6:33. Seek first the kingdom of God. Thank you. There you go. All right then. Okay, so let's look a little bit at this then. Okay, so we've kind of talked around this area of managing that time as of singleness, say, however, whatever that looks like. We do live, focusing on love for a minute, we live in a culture as well that is obsessive with not true love, but cheap imitations of true love. So first off, I want to know, is there such a thing? Is there such a thing as true love? And then why is God's love so crucial to having healthy expectations from human relationships?
Wow. When are you going to start doing the easy questions? Because you remember you sent me that text in the week. You were like, "Oh, don't worry, this week's going to be fine." That's I thought it was all going to be easy tonight.
There you go.
Oh my days! Is there such a thing? I think. What is true love? You know what I mean? Like, I just think it's love. I feel like God, like the Bible tells us, God is love, and for me, that's it. You know what I mean? Like, that's the all-encompassing answer. I wouldn't really say there's true love or fake love, or I just kind of feel like if we start trying to have all these different perspectives, then it's just like you can get into a lot of gray area. God is love, so that means that in all relationships where I say I love people, I've got to be Christ-like to them in those relationships. And for me, that's it. I think if I was ever going to say true love, then that's what true love is, because it's true to what love is and to who God says he is. And obviously you look in scripture, and obviously love is actually a very expansive word, and there's so many different expressions of love, if you like, in the Bible. There's brotherly love, there's love you have for your friends, there's the undeserved in love, like the selfless love that God has for us, agape love, and then you've got the most sort of romantic one as well. So it's Pastor Roy has often said, like, the English language is really bad when for describing the word love, because there's actually a lot more to it. But then what you realize is that in all of those different types of love that that the Bible talks about, you can still find an element in God in each of them. There's still a way to express God being love in all of those instances of love. And I think that for me, that is what true love is. And then if ever there's an imitation of it, or a cheap imitation of it, it's just an imitation of love that tries to take God out of the equation. I feel like that's not, it's very difficult to get the full benefits of relationships, or loving relationships, when there is no God in that relationship, because you've kind of missed out on the key ingredient. And that's not to say that relationships without God don't work, because obviously, we see that they do, but I just feel like you get the best out of it, if everything is done. God designed love. He's the one who created love. He designed it for our pleasure and for us to do life with each other. And so why go away from the manufacturer's manual? Why not just go by what it does? I'm that kind of guy. I like to buy stuff from IKEA, which is the right way to say it, by the way, and just throw away the book with the pictures. It's not IKEA, it's IKEA.
According to who?
According to the Swedes. According to the Swedes, that's what it is. I'm sorry. Check it out.
Wow.
Yeah, but I like
I need to
throw the
research
manual
this
away.
afterwards.
Yeah, no, for real, it is. It is. It's like they've got a whole ad. I'd reenact it, but I can't do the accent properly. But yeah, so throw the manual away and attempt to build it yourself. But if you try that with love, I think you run into a lot of problems you don't need to run into, and so that's why it's so important to keep God at the center, because God is love.
Yeah. I mean, you summed it up. Like, I was really just gonna say God is love. I was gonna expand. Well, not expand. I was basically gonna say the same thing as you. Because and I feel like as well, like applying it to human relationships. How I also see it, like true love being, if we know God is love, then as Pastor Joe said, it's like being Christ-like in our own relationships. I just saw George's comment. In our relationships, like reflecting Christ-like qualities in our relationships. And it reminds me of at Christmas when we did the week where love comes down, and we talked about God's love being selfless, God's love being unconditional, God's love being generous. Like as Pastor Joe said, love presents itself, God's love presents itself in different ways, and therefore when it comes to our human relationship, it's not one set way of saying this is what love is, this is what true love looks like. It looks different for everybody else, and it's presenting itself in different ways as well. And I feel like it kind of circles to that verse where it says love one another as you love yourselves. That's like the greatest commandment I give to you. We in that general area. But like I think it and I remember one time someone broke it down and said that like in order to love other people, you need to know what it is to love yourself, and in order to know what it is to love yourself, you need to know God's love. So it's kind of all filters down in the sense of we have God's love, he loves us, we love ourselves, not in an egotistical, self-absorbed way, but we love ourselves, so therefore we can show love to other people. And it kind of like trickles down like that.
No, I think that's a really, really helpful like way of picturing it as well. That's brilliant. Okay, so now we kind of done the philosophical question. Now we're bringing it down to the grit of life. Okay, so if the truest love is God's love, none of us can quite love like God. So how do we accept like people with our imperfections, whilst also not settling for giving, let's call it fake love?
Okay.
Ooh.
All right, that's great. I think you've got to extend grace. It's God has so much grace for us. What's that scripture? Forgive us our debts as we forgive those who who sin against us. And I think understanding that we're always trying to be like Christ, and we're always trying to be the best versions of ourselves that we can be, but we will get it wrong from time to time. And so being gracious is important, I think, especially in every relationship, but especially in romantic relationships as well. It's so important that both sides, both people are extending a level of graciousness to each other, not compromise, because we're not talking about doing away with values and principles and all that kind of stuff. And it's more about being gracious, understanding that people make mistakes, and sometimes whilst the heart might be right, or the motive might be right, the actual action, the outworking of it might not always come across well, or be to the person's liking. At the end of the day, like, I think it's important to remember, before you get into relationships, you're individuals anyway. You all have your likes and you all have your interests and stuff. And so when you kind of both get together and merge, then there needs to be that period of grace, of understanding this person and that person, and then keeping your common interest, but then also kind of being like, okay, this my girlfriend or wife or whatever really likes this, so then I'm going to do that with her. Or then she can go, okay, me, for example, okay, my girlfriend Zara knows that I love bass. And so, like, back when we could like go out and stuff in the shops, like anytime we ever went to anywhere, I remember once we went to Sheffield, and like, it's just like, I'm like, where's the nearest bass shop? That's just the first thing. I just want to go to the nearest music shop, and she's just sat there for half an hour just doing nothing. But it's like the same the other way around. Like, you've got the whole thing of like, okay, when you go shopping and the guy sat down, and there's that whole thing that people talk about. In my relationship, I'm that person. I'm the one that's running around touching all the she's just sat there.
You've got that role reversal.
Yeah, we've got it all reversed. But like, just being gracious. I think that's how you kind of that's how you keep the true in it, because then you realize that God loves us and he extends grace to us, and so we want to be like God to each other, and you extend that grace as well. I think that's helpful.
Brilliant.
I think that's such a good point. I think as well, like, when you, I guess, choose to love someone or give love, you have to realize that you give love with no expectation of getting anything back. Like, not in a bad way, but in the sense of like, you're choosing to go out your way, you're choosing to love this person, and not with the condition of sorry, I just lost my point. But like, yeah, not with the condition of like, then I'm gonna get X, Y, and Z. But it's as I said, it's an unconditional thing. It doesn't come with like it doesn't come with conditions. That's what unconditional means. Lol. I don't even know where I start going with this point.
Yeah, it doesn't come with wanting anything in return, I suppose.
Yes. Yeah. When you love, you're given not to receive anything. I guess it's just because that's who that person is. You want to do that for that person. You want to go out of that way for that person. And I feel like that takes the pressure of it being perfect, or being like us being like super being super perfect about it, because we're just giving because we want to give. We're loving because we want to love. We're not loving because this is going to make us a better person, or this person is going to view us as a better person, but actually it's because of that other person we're doing it for as well. So I think, to add on to Pastor's brilliant point.
That's phenomenal answers there. And I suppose, okay, so let's talk about Valentine's Day for a little bit. So we're talking about dating now. We're kind of moved into that kind of realm, right? The expectations of dating, spoiler alert, are very different to the reality, right? And one of the things about Valentine's Day is that it emphasizes like a moment of expressing love for like a day. But I suppose that's not quite doing justice to the actual goal of a loving relationship, which is for that kind of thing to happen daily. So how do we ensure that we don't get drawn into merely expressing love every once in a while in moments, but actually expressing that love consistently?
I think it's so interesting, and I find Valentine's Day very interesting because everyone like says it's like this big day of love, but I'm thinking, what are you lot doing for the other 364 days of the year? Like, well, where is the love, as people say? But I think it's so
Shout
true.
Out
like,
Black Eyed Peas.
I know, legit sponsored.
Sponsored us. Can you get me on as well?
Sponsored. I think we should just get an acapella of Pastor.
Actually, no, I'm with IKEA. I forgot. Sorry.
Oh.
Sorry. Yeah.
You can't. Wow, look at that. Just but no, I think it's such a good question of actually being wrapped up in this Valentine's Day, like, rush, and being like caught up in the moment of thinking that this is the only day I get to demonstrate love. But actually, you have people in your life all the time, and there's so many opportunities. You don't have to be doing grand gestures. I mean, if that's the type of person you are, great. But you can show love in so many different ways, as we've mentioned before. Like, love doesn't just present itself once, but in many different forms. And actually, just taking the opportunity to reach out, and not even just in romantic relationships, but like you know, friendships, whatever. Obviously we're talking about romantic, but just taking the opportunity each day, like, you know, if it's just a small thing of like, you know, saying you appreciate someone, what is it like? And, you know, everyone has their love languages, isn't it? So, you know, getting to know someone's love languages and applying it that way. I don't think, I think Valentine's Day is so interesting because everyone just like builds up to this 14th of February thinking that, and then that's it. But actually, like, love is still around for the whole year too.
It's such a good answer, isn't it? You know, that's very, very true. And
Yeah.
I feel like I do sympathize with the question a little bit, because I suppose ultimately, if we're to really get down to it, life is a series of moments. But I love what you said, Angie, there about how actually it doesn't need to be the grand gestures. You know, something that I love is my wife Becca. She, every now and then when she goes shopping for food, she'll, at our Asda down the road, there's a hot meat counter, which, by the way, if you've never taken the time to explore, it is 100% worth it. And when she goes shopping, she'll have a little peruse through there, and if they have the breaded chili chicken wings, she brings me a box back, and it's the best. It is. And I mean, that for me, that is a moment of just pure fulfillment, enjoyment, and just love shown. So there you go. I feel like it just goes to show it doesn't need to be the big things.
I love it.
Goodness me. Brett, okay. Wow.
Pastor Joe, I feel like you had something to say there.
Yeah, just marveling that Asda do that. I mean, okay, a bit off topic, but you've sampled the Tesco deli section, you've sampled the Asda's deli. Which are you gonna say that's sort of the pinnacle of it, the Asda one, the breaded chicken wings? Because I haven't tried those.
Well, for me, I think they top it. They top it. They've got a little bit more about them to the plain wings that you get from Tesco.
Oh my gosh, he called them plain.
I'm loving this chicken review we're having mid-conversation.
I mean, listen, if anybody
connoisseur.
from the Tesco deli section is watching, Pastor Jonah said your wings are plain. Y'all need to step up. That's what I'm saying.
All right. Okay, here's a question then. So what does the Bible have to say about dating?
I think the Bible says a man leaves his mother and father and finds a wife. And I think it's absolutely the wrong idea to think that the danger of kind of going, you know, I'm going to be, it's one of those things that's a tension to manage. I feel like the danger of going, I'm focused on God and all that stuff, which is absolutely correct and important. The danger could be just kind of sit back and do nothing, and don't actually, you know, find a relationship if that's what you want. There's nothing wrong. We're not bashing wanting a relationship. That's not the wrong thing. We're just saying have the right reasons. But I think the Bible does encourage dating. You know, if you're going to make a lifelong commitment to someone, then it needs to be someone that you can make a lifelong commitment with. And the Bible treats marriage as a very sacred thing. It's very, very important. It's very sacred, and so it's not a light subject. It's not something that you just fall into or rush into. And so, absolutely, I think that whole language of finding, I think is important, because then it paints that picture of actually it's not a passive thing, and it's actually an active process. And so I feel like it's a tension to manage, absolutely, but it's one that can be done. It's not about doing one or the other. It's about doing both at the same time. It's about being focused on God, but at the same time finding whoever my future spouse is going to be. But the whole basis and foundation of that is out of a godly relationship that you've got going on in your heart and ultimately with that person. And so I think that's the important thing. I don't think, and I'm not saying this doesn't happen, but I think it's very rare that God just kind of plucks someone out and goes, yeah, this is the person for you. I don't really think that's how it works. So I think, there's definitely an element of finding as well. That happens and that needs to happen. I think that would be my kind of perspective on it.
Yeah. I love that. I feel like from a different perspective, I feel most times, because I'm single, so I hear a lot of talk about, dating isn't like that, like explicitly mentioned in the Bible, like the word dating. But I also, I think even though it's not mentioned, I feel like the Bible does tell us a lot about the people we should be. And I feel that therefore that is applicable to like how you can how you can view dating. It, like, you know, for like women, it talks about the Proverbs 31 women, etc. For like men, it talks about, you know, the type of man you should be and the type of man you can prepare yourself to be. And I know obviously we were talking about before, you know, how we work on ourselves and etc. But I feel like, I feel like the Bible may not have like specific things to do with dating, but I feel like it tells us a lot about what we should have our value in, the things like, you know, we should work for, the things that we should care for, how we can care for other people, how we can love on other people, how we can be generous, how we view marriage, as you said, Pastor Joe. So I feel like the Bible is kind of like, and I'm taking your point, but going in a different direction, but I feel like it's about finding in the Bible, and as well in context, obviously not just picking and choosing like specific verses, but finding what's applicable to how we are supposed to live life, you know, here on earth, and actually applying that therefore to like romantic relationships as well.
No, that's really, really helpful. Very, very practical as well. Maybe we'll wrap up with this last question then. So a perception that is very easy to go into with romantic relationships, I suppose really any relationships as well, but seeing as it's Valentine's Day and we're focusing on romantic relationships, we can talk about that. We can look at them as what we have to gain from them. And so I suppose, is this a healthy perception? And if not, what would be a more healthy way to look at it?
Yeah, I think absolutely don't see it as only what you can get from them, but don't not see it as what you can get from them. Yeah, I think it's very wise to not think about what you can get from it, because that's just not realistic. But then it shouldn't be the only thing that you're thinking of. So I think the healthy thing is thinking kind of holistically, you know, what can it do for me and what can I bring to the table, and how can we both serve, you know, whatever purpose that it is that, you know, God has placed on my life, on her life, on our lives, and just kind of thinking holistically, and maybe instead of just thinking in such individualistic terms, think more kind of long term, think more kind of you know, kingdom. I know it's very cliche, think about God, but it is true. That's because ultimately that's what lasts, and that's what will kind of keep you both going in the same direction. So I think that's helpful.
Yeah, no, so true. I feel like, again, just following off from that, it's like, you know, the whole idea, like, I mean, we're not saying that romantic relationships are bad, like, you know, Pastor Joe, you're married, Pastor Joe, you're dated, it's great, but I feel like, you know, your life is not your life is not the be all and end all if you are or aren't in a relationship, and our whole lives do not have to revolve around that. You know, as we mentioned, our priority and where like God sits is at the top of, like, you know, if God's not in it, then maybe we shouldn't want it. And I feel like maybe like looking at what we have to get out of it is as you said, it is unhealthy, because it just feels like we put a lot of value and we put a lot of our validation into when we get into a relationship, and that therefore becomes our security, that becomes, you know, who we are. But we are so much more. Like when God put us on this earth, it wasn't with the intention of just being in a relationship. Yeah, that's part of maybe some of our journeys, but that isn't the sole purpose of why we're here. And so when we look at what all we have to gain from being in a relationship, I feel like we miss out of like what we actually have to gain out of life and just general as well. So I feel like, you know, it's good to have it. It's like a desire of our hearts as well, but at the same time, there's many of other things that can happen in our life too.
I think that's a phenomenal point to wrap up on. I just want to kind of reiterate, just to highlight a couple of things that you said there, Angie, as well, because it's very, very true, isn't it? Because I was just thinking as you were talking that actually, if we had something to gain from romantic relationships that was absolutely crucial to the human experience, then, well, Jesus was single throughout his life. Paul, arguably, you know, certainly one of the most influential Christians to ever walk the earth, he was single throughout his ministry. And so we think, you know, Jesus came so that we would have life to the full. Jesus didn't come so we could get married. Jesus came so that we could have life to the full. Like, and Jesus plus nothing can give us that. And so actually, instead of looking at like, okay, when I get into a relationship, it's like my half and your half and we complete each other. No, it's not about that. It's actually like, you know, we both come as made whole by Jesus. And actually then, you know, that relationship glorifies God, and actually that's the ultimate goal. And I love, Pastor Joe, what you said there actually about, because that way then it's not just about just me giving or just me taking. Actually, it's about like both of us are actually just, you know, showing that ultimate love to one another.
Yeah, love that. I realized that I misquoted the scripture earlier. It's actually he who finds a wife finds a good thing, but still kind of the same point. But because I was saying, I was like, this doesn't sound right, what I said.
I actually can't remember what you said, so
No.
you got away
what I
with it.
said was a man shall leave his father and mother and find that it's actually cling unto his wife, but then it's he who finds a wife finds. But anyway, that's besides the point. But you know, but that's been really good. I feel like we've covered a whole wide range of topics tonight, which is so cool. And I just love the way that we've kind of really approached the discussion. You know, it's hopefully been really helpful. I know that I've learned a lot from what everyone's been saying. Just all of those perspectives and actually thinking about relationships in a much more sort of holistic sense, as opposed to a very kind of tunnel vision kind of approach, which is just looking for one thing when there's so much more out there. So I really hope that, you know, everyone listening and everyone watching has really enjoyed that as well. Be sure to, guys, to if you're on YouTube, be sure to hit the subscribe button there at the bottom left is where it should be, just underneath the video. And also, if you're listening on a podcast platform, be sure to follow us. You know, this is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere else where you listen to your podcast. It's all there for you. You can also follow our Junction Church podcast page, which is a separate one where we put up all of our preachers as well. And hey, if you're on YouTube as well, you're going to see in the description below a link there where you can give to what the Junction Church is doing. You can give to support what we're doing. You can go on our website, www.junctionchurch.net/give. We're doing loads of exciting things. You can get all the details in there. And we would really appreciate your support. But that's been really great tonight, Pastor Jonah and Angie. It's been great. I love Friday nights. Love hanging out with you guys. And hey, guys, thank you guys on YouTube for watching. Thank you all for listening. And we'll see you again next week. Have a wonderful evening.